get into college?
Right.
That is a big. So I think that if you're going to make the case for investing in your sports career as a kid, I think you need one of two things. You either need to argue it's going to help you get into college, and one of my economist friends says if you're going to do that, you should get your kid into fencing. That fencing is a particularly good way to help you get into a good, an elite college. So getting into college is one thing, and in the book I go into that. Of course, it's hard to even show a lot of evidence that there's a big advantage to that, because it might get you into a slightly better college, but economists generally aren't sure that the quality of the college on the margin makes that much difference. So if the same kid goes to Ohio State or Harvard, it's not a complete given that it has a big difference on their outcomes.
And yet you do say, what if your kid is Kevin Durant?
So that's the other. So I said there were two reasons you might do it. One is college, and the other is if your kid is 6'8" and very coordinated at age 13, then the odds change dramatically. So Kevin Durant is a wonderful example that I go into in the book, because he has a bunch of things in favor of him becoming a star. One is, well, the reasons he became a star was his physique. Just the fact that he's such a gifted athlete, and he happens to be 6 feet 8 inches tall. As the basketball players say, you can't learn tall. So he had that advantage going for him. And then, but the other thing about Kevin Durant is the calculus is slightly different if you come from a background where your labor market prospects may not be as great. And so, given how hard it is to move up the socioeconomic ladder in the United States for reasons you've probably talked about on your show before, the economic mobility isn't what we would hope it would be. And so if you come from a really tough background, sports might look like a better way to really jump to a higher income distribution relative to more traditional ways in the labor market. And Kevin Durant came from a very humble background, and if you just sort of statistically looked at what his future might have been like without sports, it may not, it wasn't a rosy picture.
Yeah, I think of Venus and Serena Williams. I mean, and they obviously had a dad that was very driven and a family that was supportive, that it was a tough background, but it's, you wonder how much of it is because of the dad and pushing them, how much of it was just natural skill. I mean, there's a lot that has to be taken into consideration.
Can you answer that,
yeah,
Professor? The nature versus nurture debate here?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think it's easy to answer it in basketball, because the answer is if you're 6 feet 8, your odds of getting to the NBA are just wildly higher than if you're 6 feet tall. So in the book I talk about Russell Westbrook, who went as a kid into much the same investment mode as Kevin Durant. His family went all in on basketball. And of course it paid off for both of them, but if you looked before they made those investments, Kevin Durant probably made a rational investment. Russell Westbrook probably got lucky, meaning there are tons of athletic 6-foot kids, and the vast majority of them never get to the NBA. There are not that many 6'8", 13-year-olds, and a substantial fraction of them get to the NBA. So Venus and Serena, again, probably, obviously it worked out amazing, but if you were to just try to run the numbers, was that a good investment beforehand? I think you would have to say it wasn't, but it just paid off. It did end up paying off really well, obviously.
We're going to go into more chapters. Just got a minute before we have to take a break, and then we'll come back and continue. But as someone who is Czechoslovakian, I love this chapter 2. What do Silicon Valley and Czech women's tennis have in common? So you've got a minute to talk about it, and then we'll talk some more. But what is the connection, just quickly?
Well, very quickly, I like to say Czech women's tennis is like Silicon Valley. There's not a natural reason why Czech women should be so great, but there's a combination of historical accidents and then these network effects where the Czech women sort of Czech girls push each other so hard that they end up becoming just great tennis players. There's no natural reason they should be any good. If you look at why are Norwegians so good at cross-country skiing as I do in the book, there's a lot more of a natural reason for that.
Right.
But economic networks and economic competition really can lead to
Oh.
dynasties.
What about the weather as well?
Well, the weather doesn't work for the Czech story. It certainly
Okay,
works
it
for
works for the Norwegian story.
I know what the answer is because my family used to kid that Czech women were strong like bulls. So that's why. No, I'm just kidding. But we did used to say that at home. Paul, we're going to come back with you. Paul Oyster over at the Stanford Graduate School of Business talking about his book, An Economist Goes to the Game. We're going to continue this conversation. So fun to go through this. We'll be back with him in just a moment.
Well, let's get a check on the latest world and national news. Nancy Lyons is in her 99.1 newsroom in Washington, D.C. Hey, Nance.
Thanks, Tim. A 6th Memphis Police Department officer has been disciplined for his involvement in the brutal beating and arrest of Tyree Nichols. Memphis police say Officer Preston Hemphill was suspended shortly after the January 7th arrest of Nichols, who died 3 days later. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is urging calm between Israelis and Palestinians following days of climbing tensions and violence. Blinken is traveling in the Middle East. He met with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu today, and he meets with Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas tomorrow. Well, China is warning House Speaker Kevin McCarthy not to visit Taiwan. Now, Foreign Ministry spokeswoman did not mention the new speaker by name, but she was asked about a report last week that McCarthy is planning a trip. We get more from Bloomberg's Anne-Marie Hordern in Washington.
This would be about Republicans, as the Democrats have had, making sure that they are standing up for Taiwan and also showing that they are not just talking tough, but
More on that from Bloomberg's Nathan Hager.
The European Union's upcoming ban on Russian fuel could choke off backup gas supplies in this country. The ban kicks in this Sunday. It will put a strain on how much gas the EU can make for itself or the East Coast, which is relying more and more on transatlantic imports in the summer. Seasonal gas stockpiles in this country are already at their lowest levels in a decade, and heavy winter maintenance at refineries could add even further to the strain. In Washington, I'm Nathan Hager, Bloomberg Radio.
Global news powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in over 120 countries. I'm Nancy Lyons.
You see the value in worldwide market news,
Stocks in Asia saw some heavy selling overnight.
and you want it first.
Several Fed officials beat the drum for higher interest rates.
So do we.
Crypto is in focus today.
Wake up with Bloomberg Daybreak, U.S. edition. Available now on your podcast feed. Each weekday morning at 6 a.m. Eastern. Get the news you need to start your day in just 15 minutes. Subscribe to Bloomberg Daybreak, U.S. edition today on Apple, Spotify, and everywhere you get your podcasts.
let's all let people pedal those bikes. Intervals. Burn. Come on, burn. Woo!
Performance is more exhilarating on the real road. Introducing the Audi Q5 with a 261 horsepower engine that'll take you 0 to 60 in 5.7 seconds. Always obey local speed and traffic laws.
Don't let someone else drive off in the Audi model you've always wanted. Visit your tri-state area Audi dealer to get behind the wheel of yours today, or visit AudiOffers.com for more information.
Credit card bills, large purchases, that home improvement project, it could all add up. Thankfully, Columbia Bank can help you consolidate and save with a home equity line of credit. Get the funds you need for anything you need. And the rate, often lower than a credit card. Great rate, something you can always count on. Just like Columbia Bank. Apply quickly and easily online or in a branch. Count on Columbia. Subject to credit approval. Member FDIC. Equal housing lender.
Are you interested in a challenging and exciting career in the New York metro area? One where you can be part of solving complex challenges across industries and geographies. Bloomberg's ever-expanding technology, data, news, and media services foster innovation, empower clients, and offer nearly limitless opportunities for career growth. Visit Bloomberg.com/careers to view our current job opportunities in New York and Princeton, New Jersey. Bloomberg LP is an equal opportunity employer. The address once again is Bloomberg.com/careers.
If you're having a business dispute, the process can be slow and drawn out, especially if you rely on litigation in the courts. You can wait for years before your case is resolved, and the longer your case proceeds, the more your case can cost. Not with the American Arbitration Association. Arbitration or mediation with the American Arbitration Association is faster. In fact, nearly 50% of our cases settle prior to hearings. ADR.org. Resolve faster.
Welcome to Crash Course, a podcast about business, political, and social disruption, and what we can learn from it. I'm Tim O'Brien. Every week on Crash Course, I'm going to bring listeners directly into the arenas where epic upheavals occur, and I'm going to explore the lessons we can learn when creativity and ambition collide with competition and power. Listen to Crash Course wherever you get your podcasts.
Bloomberg Radio, on demand and in your podcast feed.
On the latest Balance of Power podcast, I talk with Democratic Congressman John Garamendi of California on negotiations with Republicans to raise the debt ceiling.
During the Trump period, the debt ceiling was raised 3 times by the Republicans and by President Trump as they were adding $7.8 trillion to the debt. And now suddenly this becomes an issue. Now this is all about trying to use the debt ceiling as a nuclear option or a nuclear weapon to get their way on Social Security cuts, on Medicare cuts, and whatever other cuts they want. There is a way to do this, and that is use the appropriation process. That's where you sit down and you do the tough work, item by item, line item by line item. We want more, we want less. How do we make a cut here? How do we provide the services at all, or how do we provide them more effectively and efficiently? That's where we need to go. This debt limit wasn't important during the Trump era because 3 times they just routinely did it. Now they want to use it as a nuclear weapon.
So, Congressman, for those of us not involved in the process the way you are, we listen to you, and that sounds perfectly reasonable. Let's use the appropriations process, go line item by line item. That makes perfect sense. We hear about that every single year. It never gets done. So is part of the Republicans' position here is let's try a different approach because we're not getting it done the other way?
Well, in fact, they have the power. They have the power, at least in the House of Representatives, of writing the appropriation bill. If they want to make a cut in Social Security, that's where you do it. If you want to make a cut in defense, you do it there.
Get more of this and other conversations on the latest Balance of Power podcast. Listen on the Bloomberg Business app, Bloomberg.com, and anywhere else you get your podcasts. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
It's 4:40 on Wall Street. I'm Charlie Pellet. We check the markets all day long at Bloomberg. Earnings after the bell include Whirlpool. It expects a decline in sales in 2023 as economies around the world lose steam. At the same time, Whirlpool says easing raw material costs are expected to provide some relief. Whirlpool right now is up by about 2.6%. NXP Semi forecasts revenue for the first quarter, and that guidance missed the average analyst estimate. After hours, NXP Semi down by roughly 4%. AMD will be reporting this morning. AMD down after hours by about 3.9%. Down day on Wall Street with the Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ all finishing the day not only in the red, but at session lows. We had the S&P down 52 points today, down 1.3%. The Dow down 261. NASDAQ down 227. A decline for NASDAQ of 2%. 10-year yield 3.54%, with the 2-year yielding 4.23%. Stocks turn cautious. Investors turn cautious going into an eventful week that includes the Fed's rate decision and a slew of big tech earnings. And Lindsay Pieggs at Stifel Nicolaus sees the Fed keeping restrictive policy in place.
With inflation still too high, it's very clear that the Fed still has a ways to go. But that being said, I think the Fed has been very clear that it's willing to slow its pace of ascension.
Right now, the 10-year again 3.54%. Spot gold down $5 the ounce to $19.23, down 0.3. West Texas Intermediate crude oil down 2.5%. $77.70 a barrel. I'm Charlie Pellet, and that is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. I want to get back to our guest. Still with us, Paul Oyster. He's Senior Associate Dean and Economics Professor at the Stanford Graduate School of Business. We were talking about his book, An Economist Goes to the Game, How to Throw Away $580 million and Other Surprising Insights from the Economics of Sports. $580 million. Wait, where'd that number come from?
So that's an estimate I calculated based on the strike at the NBA in, I believe it was 2011. So there was maybe a more up-to-date version to talk about was there was a strike in Major League Baseball at the beginning of the most recent season. I don't know if you remember last spring training. Not a strike, sorry, a lock. In both cases it was a lockout, not a strike. So the point in whether talking about the NBA or Major League Baseball or whatever is you see in sports, and this is a broader thing, you see it in other collective bargaining agreement situations, where you get these two groups. In the case of sports, it's the owners and the players union, and they rely so much on each other. Their options are so much better if they work together than if they split up, but at the same time they can't help themselves from trying to steal a bigger share of the pie. It's a very common thing in economics where you have these bilateral agreements where there's a lot of value captured by the agreement, and you don't want to mess it up, but at the same time you can't help but try to take too much. And when that leads to a lockout, as it did in the NBA, it sometimes is just like literally the NBA and the players pretty much just burned a pile of $580 million that they'll never get back.
Okay, it's a lot of money. I want to talk cheating.
Yeah.
I want to talk cheating.
Let's go there.
Okay, there's an entire chapter in your book dedicated to cheating, and it talks about Lance Armstrong and the way that it asks a question about whether or not you can actually win the Tour de France if you're not doping. Take us into this chapter and why athletes cheat.
So you only got half of it. I like to think the chapter is about why they cheat and lie.
Oh, sorry. Excuse me. Thank you.
Well said.
They cheat and lie because the incentives there are very strong. I mean, we see this in other places as well. When we set up rules that we can't enforce and the value of breaking those rules is really high, people are going to break them.